On June 20th, 1998, 22-year-old Victoria Matthews should have been stepping into the happiest night of her life, hours after saying, "I do," inside Charleston's elegant Grand Heritage Hotel. The young bride was discovered lifeless in her bridal suite. A night that should have symbolized love and beginnings instead became a tragedy that stunned everyone present. 4 people had been near Victoria during those final hours, and each one told a very different story about what happened. The best man swore the evening was nothing unusual. The maid of honor insisted Victoria's behavior was alarmingly off. The hotel manager shifted blame toward faulty security protocols, and the wedding photographer claimed he hardly interacted with the bride at all. For decades, these 4 conflicting accounts fueled endless suspicion, gossip, and unanswered questions. But 26 years later, when investigators reopened the case with advanced DNA technology, the truth they uncovered shocked even those who believed they already knew the story of that fateful wedding night. Before we begin, hit subscribe to help uncover the hidden stories they tried to bury and to make sure no name, no victim is ever forgotten. 4 witnesses, 4 clashing stories, but in the end, only one was telling the truth. My name is Jake Morrison, and for 26 years, I've carried a weight that has defined my life. On June 20th, 1998, my best friend married the love of his life at Charleston's Grand Heritage Hotel. It should have been a perfect celebration, the happiest day anyone could remember. But hours later, his bride, Victoria Matthews, was found dead in the very bridal suite where she had gone to start her future. From that night onward, people whispered my name. Some thought I knew more than I was saying. Some thought I had been too close to Victoria. Others openly suspected I had played a part in what happened. 26 years of questions, of pointed stares, of friends turning into doubters. 26 years of silence I couldn't escape. I need to tell you my story, all of it, every detail that has haunted me, every observation that people twisted against me. Maybe you'll believe me, maybe you won't, but at least you'll know what I saw, what I heard, and what I lived through, because Victoria deserved more than rumors, and Michael, my best friend, deserved the truth. Michael Morrison and I met at the University of South Carolina. We weren't just classmates, we became brothers. For 3 years we were roommates, drinking cheap beer, pulling all-nighters before exams, laughing at our own inside jokes. I knew his moods, his fears, his ambitions. He was driven, but sometimes insecure, the kind of guy who needed someone in his corner to remind him he was good enough. It was at one of those chaotic fraternity parties in 1995 that I introduced him to Victoria. She was standing near the back porch, holding a plastic cup of soda instead of beer, her auburn hair catching the porch lights. She was a junior, majoring in art history, and she had this effortless way of making people feel like they mattered. She wasn't loud or flashy, but she didn't need to be. Michael saw her, and I swear I watched him fall in love right then. From that moment on, they were inseparable. I watched them grow as a couple, her quiet intelligence balancing his restless energy, his humor pulling her out of her shell. Everyone said they were perfect together, and when Michael asked me to be his best man, I didn't hesitate. I felt honored. But here's where people started twisting things. Because I introduced them, because I spent so much time with both of them, some assumed I must have wanted Victoria for myself. That suspicion only grew after her death. They thought, why would the best man pay such close attention to the bride unless there was more? So I'll tell you exactly what I saw that day, and you can decide for yourself. The Grand Heritage Hotel was stunning, a 19th century landmark with chandeliers that threw golden light across the ballroom, polished marble floors, and staircases wide enough to make anyone feel royal. Victoria had chosen it for its historic charm, and she had orchestrated every detail with precision. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Victoria, radiant in her white gown, walked down the aisle with that half-nervous smile brides often have, the kind that hides tears at the corners of the eyes. Michael looked like he could barely breathe when he saw her. The vows were heartfelt, the kiss genuine. It was the kind of ceremony that made you forget bad things ever existed in the world. I spent the morning keeping Michael steady, fetching ties, fixing a cufflink, making jokes to cut his nerves. He was buzzing with energy, jittery like a kid before a championship game. We reminisced about college, about the night he first met Victoria. He kept saying, "She's my everything, Jake. I can't believe this is real." Everything about the day was choreographed perfection. Guests sipped champagne. Photographers snapped endless rolls of film, and the couple glided from table to table like celebrities. Being the best man wasn't just about holding the ring. I had responsibilities. I gave the toast, coordinated with staff, kept things moving so the couple could simply enjoy themselves. My speech was simple. I talked about how Michael and Victoria completed each other, how their love story had been a privilege to witness. The room clapped. Victoria hugged me. Michael laughed with relief. For that moment, everything felt right. But when you look back on a night like that, you start remembering the little details that didn't fit, the strange notes in the melody. Victoria wasn't a heavy drinker. Everyone who knew her would tell you the same. She liked a glass of wine, maybe two, but she was careful. That night, though, something shifted. I saw her at the bar more than once. Guests were lining up to toast her, handing her glasses of champagne, wine, cocktails. At first, it seemed harmless. It was her wedding night after all. But around 9:30 or 10, I noticed she was unsteady. Her laugh stretched a little too long. Her words slurred around the edges. I pulled her aside quietly. "You doing okay, Vic?" I asked. She grinned, swaying slightly, and brushed me off. "Just having fun, Jake. Don't worry about me." But I did worry. I told Michael she had a bit too much. Maybe he should keep an eye on her. He shrugged it off. "She's fine, man. She deserves to celebrate." He didn't want to play the controlling husband on their first night. I couldn't blame him. Still, the unease lingered. Looking back, people used this against me. Why was I watching her so closely? Why did I notice things Michael supposedly missed? By 11:30, the night was winding down. The bouquet had been tossed, the garter flung, the cake cut. Victoria smiled through it all, though her steps faltered and her eyelids drooped between laughs. Midnight came. Guests began filtering out. Families said their goodbyes, friends embraced, and Victoria clung to Michael's arm as they thanked people for coming. She was still coherent, but her movements were slow, her cheeks flushed deep red. Michael asked me to handle cleanup, collect gifts, decorations, stray belongings. It was tedious, 30 minutes of sorting and hauling. When I finished around 12:30, I went to say goodbye, but they were gone. Not in the ballroom, not in the lobby. I assumed, naturally, they'd retreated upstairs. Why wouldn't they? It was their wedding night. And here's the point that haunted me later, my timeline. The last time I saw her alive was midnight. After that, nothing. I went to my third-floor room, exhausted, and collapsed into bed. The pounding woke me, harsh, frantic. I opened the door and saw Michael. His face was white chalk, his tuxedo shirt wrinkled and half unbuttoned. His hands shook, his voice broke. "She's dead, Jake. Victoria's dead." My mind couldn't process it. Dead? Less than 4 hours ago, she was dancing. I followed him in a daze to the bridal suite, where paramedics swarmed. Victoria lay on the bed, in her gown, her skin pale, her eyes closed forever. The scene is burned into my memory. The contrast between the joy of midnight and the silence of that room at 3:30 will never leave me. The police asked me everything. Where had I been? What had I seen? Why had I noticed her drinking? Did I have feelings for her? I answered honestly. I told them about her slurred words, about my concern. I told them about going to my room at 12:30. But suspicion doesn't need proof. It only needs gaps, and my night was full of them. I wasn't in the suite between midnight and 3:30. I couldn't account for every minute. Investigators wondered, had I followed them? Had I entered the suite somehow? Was my attention to her drinking a cover story? Some said I was secretly in love with her, that I couldn't stand seeing her with Michael, that I waited for my moment. I can't explain how damaging that was. I had girlfriends throughout their relationship. I respected their bond. I never crossed a line. But when someone dies so suddenly, people grasp for explanations, and the best man, the man closest to both of them, makes an easy villain. The medical examiner ruled alcohol poisoning. Her blood alcohol content was dangerously high. But people asked, how? How could she have consumed so much without collapsing in front of us? Did someone give her something more? Alcohol, drugs, something hidden? I was among the last to see her alive. I'd commented on her drinking. To many, that made me a prime suspect. I left Charleston. I couldn't endure the whispers. I moved to Atlanta, tried to rebuild a life. Michael and I stayed friends for a while, but distance grew. He never accused me outright, but I saw the flickers in his eyes, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his best friend had known more than he said. Eventually, we drifted apart.
The guilt ate at me, not guilt of causing her death, but guilt of not preventing it. Could I have insisted she stop drinking? Could I have escorted her upstairs? Could I have been the barrier between life and death? Decades passed. Rumors clung. Relationships failed because people Googled my name and found old articles, whispers, speculation. I grew cautious, distant, unwilling to let new people in. In 2010, Victoria's family hired a private investigator. I spoke with him, hoping for clarity. He said other witnesses had inconsistencies. He hinted that maybe the truth was elsewhere. It gave me hope, but nothing changed. The case froze again. Then came the call this year. Technology had advanced. DNA from old evidence had revealed something new. For the first time in 26 years, I wasn't a suspect. The evidence cleared me and pointed towards someone else at the wedding.
Relief flooded me, but so did anger. 26 years of suspicion, of ruined trust, of a life derailed, all because gaps in time and my concern for a friend's drinking painted me guilty. And yet here's the question. Was my story truly innocent? I can tell you what I saw, what I did, where I was, but even now investigators point out, why did I remember her drinking in such detail? Why did I go to bed so quickly instead of checking on them? Why was I the one cleaning up, conveniently absent from the suite during the crucial window? They say innocence is simple, but my story is complicated. For 26 years, I've replayed that night, the laughter, the music, the stumble in her steps, the final hug, then the knock, the news, the body. Victoria deserved better. Michael deserved better. And maybe I deserved better too, but suspicion doesn't care about fairness. So now I ask you, what do you think? Does my account sound genuine, or are there cracks that suggest otherwise? Did my actions mark me as a concerned friend, or a man with secrets still hidden? Because one thing is certain, on June 20th, 1998, a bride walked into her future, and by dawn, she was gone. My name is Sarah Chen, and for 26 years I've lived with a secret I should have shared long ago. I was Victoria Matthews' maid of honor on the night she died, but more than that, I was her closest friend, bound to her since high school. And on that wedding night, I knew something was terribly wrong. I felt it in her words, in her eyes, in her trembling hands. But I stayed silent, and silence, I've come to realize, can be as dangerous as action. Now, with the truth finally exposed, I need people to understand why I held my tongue, why I failed my best friend, and why what I saw and heard that night still keeps me awake every single time I close my eyes. Victoria and I met when we were 15. She was the new girl from Columbia, nervous and quiet, and the school asked me to show her around. What began as a simple tour turned into a friendship that consumed us both. We shared an obsession with art, hours of sketching in notebooks, afternoons swapping photographs, late nights watching vintage movies no one else our age cared about. We became inseparable. Through the dramas of high school, the awkwardness of college applications, the excitement of graduation, we faced it all side by side. Even when we went to different universities, she to USC for art history, me staying in Charleston for business school, we never drifted. Weekly phone calls, holiday visits, hours spent laughing until our ribs hurt. To everyone, we were sisters in everything but blood. That closeness mattered on her wedding night, because while others saw a happy bride enjoying her party, I saw something else, something darker. When Victoria met Michael in her junior year, I wasn't convinced. She had a habit of falling for charm, guys who sparkled at first but fizzled fast. I was protective, maybe overly so, but Michael seemed different, polite, attentive, steady. Over time, I lowered my guard. He wasn't like the others. He made her laugh, made her believe in herself. So when she called in February of 1998, breathless with excitement, announcing he'd proposed, I didn't hesitate to be thrilled for her. She asked me to be her maid of honor. I said yes before she could finish the question. The months of planning that followed were a whirlwind. I helped with everything. Flowers, decorations, bridal shower, bachelorette party. Victoria wanted perfection, and I wanted her to have it. But beneath the lists and laughter, I noticed cracks. In the weeks before the ceremony, she was different. Not in big ways, small tremors, tiny fissures only I would notice. She slept poorly, snapped at trivial things, second-guessed choices she had once been certain about. When I pressed, she insisted it was normal wedding stress. And maybe it was, but deep down, I knew my friend. Her nerves weren't just about napkins and dresses. Something else was weighing on her. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, she looked lighter. She laughed. She joked. She seemed to have set her worries aside. I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the stress really was temporary. But I was not wrong. The morning of June 20th began beautifully. I arrived at her room at 9 a.m. Hair, makeup, laughter, the rituals of a bride preparing. She seemed genuinely happy, even giddy. She pointed out the weather, the church, the way her dress shimmered in the light. Watching her that morning, I believed everything was going to be fine. And the ceremony was breathtaking. She was radiant. Standing beside her as she said her vows to Michael, I felt proud, almost maternal. My best friend was stepping into the life she wanted, or at least the life she said she wanted. The celebration began with joy. Food, dancing, music, endless congratulations. Victoria glowed as she moved from table to table. Guests saw a bride in her element, basking in her night. But I saw more. Around 9 p.m., her demeanor shifted. Her laughter, once warm, turned sharp, too loud, too forced. Her speech quickened, words tumbling out unnaturally. At first, I brushed it off. Champagne and nerves, a bride letting loose. But it didn't stop. By 10 p.m., she was stumbling. Her speech slurred, her eyes glazed. She clutched my arm, whispered things that didn't make sense. I asked how much she'd been drinking. She snapped, defensive, dismissive. She insisted she was fine, but she wasn't. Her condition went far beyond alcohol. Something was deeply wrong. Then came 11 p.m. I was in the ladies' room when she staggered in, crying. Her hands shook as she grabbed me. Her words chilled me. Someone here isn't who they seem to be. I feel watched. I feel unsafe. Think about that. A bride, on her wedding night, whispering fear instead of joy. I begged her for details, who, why, what had happened, but she couldn't explain. She was incoherent, lost between panic and intoxication. She made me swear not to tell anyone. She said she might be imagining it, that she didn't want to ruin the night. I should have ignored her plea. I should have gone straight to Michael or even the police, but I didn't. I told myself she was drunk, that her fears were irrational, and that choice, that silence, is something I'll regret for the rest of my life. After that, I hovered near her, watching as her body gave in to exhaustion. By 11:45, she sat at the head table, vacant-eyed, whispering that she was tired, that she wanted to sleep. I offered to take her upstairs, but Michael appeared, insisting he would handle it. He half carried her toward the elevators. I watched them go, telling myself she'd be safe with him. That was the last time I saw her alive. At 4 a.m., the knock shattered my sleep. Michael hysterical, screaming that Victoria was dead. I ran with him to the suite. The sight of her, still in her gown, lifeless, will never leave my eyes. The police questioned me. I told them everything, almost everything. I admitted her drinking, her stumbling, her disorientation, but I withheld her bathroom confession. I convinced myself it would add nothing but confusion. I convinced myself her words were drunken paranoia. Was that cowardice? Yes, but at the time I thought I was protecting her reputation, protecting Michael from additional pain. In reality, I was protecting myself from the burden of truth. As weeks passed, the official cause of death was declared: alcohol poisoning.
But I couldn't forget her words. I couldn't shake the idea that maybe, just maybe, she was right, that someone had done something to her. The guilt consumed me. I left Charleston in 2001, moved to Seattle. I told myself I'd start over. But you don't escape secrets. They follow you, whisper in the dark, corrode every relationship. I never married, never had children. I convinced myself I didn't deserve happiness. By 2015, the guilt broke me. Therapy helped me see what I couldn't admit. Victoria's killer was responsible, yes, but my silence had given him cover. That realization pushed me to contact police in 2016. I revealed her bathroom confession at last. But by then, 20 years had passed. Too late, far too late. In 2024, the cold case reopened. New DNA technology, new eyes on old evidence. I told investigators everything this time, no omissions. When they revealed they had identified a killer, my heart collapsed because her fear had been justified. She had sensed the danger, but I failed to act. I was relieved justice was coming, but devastated my silence had helped a murderer walk free for 26 years. To Victoria's family, I say this: I am sorry. Sorry for not protecting her. Sorry for dismissing her fears. Sorry for staying quiet when she begged me to. My loyalty blinded me to the truth. And to anyone listening, when someone tells you they feel unsafe, believe them. Don't dismiss it as nerves or intoxication or imagination. Fear speaks a language we should never ignore.
Even as I share all this, some people ask, am I telling the full truth? My memory of her exact words decades later, does it sound too precise? My silence, was it really just fear, or was there more I didn't reveal? So I'll leave you with the same question investigators asked me. Does my story sound like the guilty conscience of a cowardly friend, or the carefully measured account of someone hiding deeper secrets? My name is Robert Davidson, and for 26 years I have lived under the shadow of a single night. June 20th, 1998. I was the general manager of the Grand Heritage Hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. The night Victoria Matthews, a bride barely 22 years old, was found lifeless in the very suite that was meant to host the beginning of her marriage. I was responsible for the venue, for the staff, for the safety of everyone inside those walls. And ever since, people have questioned me, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. Was our hotel secure enough? Were our staff negligent? Did I, the man in charge, miss something crucial that might have saved her life? Or worse, was I involved in something more sinister than poor judgment? I want to explain exactly what happened that night from my perspective, not just as a hotel manager trying to uphold a reputation, but as a man who witnessed a tragedy unravel within the walls of a business he ran with pride. You deserve to hear my account in detail. And when you finish, you can decide for yourself, am I the professional I claim to be, or is there something in my story that doesn't quite add up? By 1998, I had been managing the Grand Heritage for 8 years. It wasn't just a job, it was my career, my life's work. I oversaw a staff of 42, including front desk clerks, housekeeping, catering, and a small but dedicated security team. The Grand Heritage wasn't just another hotel, it was the hotel in Charleston. We hosted senators, business magnates, celebrities passing through. But our crown jewel was weddings. Lavish, elegant, unforgettable events. We averaged about 60 weddings per year, and each one mattered. A wedding wasn't simply about food and flowers. It was about delivering memories that would last lifetimes. That was my philosophy, and it was how I trained my staff. So when the Matthews-Morrison wedding was booked 18 months in advance, I knew it would be one of our biggest events of that year. 150 guests, the grand ballroom reserved, the presidential bridal suite for the newlyweds, and multiple additional rooms for family and close friends. Every aspect was planned meticulously. Victoria Matthews, the bride herself, had been especially hands-on. She came to the hotel multiple times in the year leading up to the wedding. I remember her walking through the ballroom, tapping her fingers against her chin, visualizing where the flowers would go, which table arrangements would feel most welcoming. She was thoughtful, articulate, and yes, demanding, but in a way that showed she cared deeply about making her day perfect. When someone like that entrusts you with the most important day of her life, you don't want to let her down. On June 20th, I arrived at the hotel at 7 a.m. sharp. As always, I wanted to be there early, to walk through the property and make sure everything was aligned. Catering staff were unloading crates, the florists were carrying in tall arrangements of lilies and roses, housekeeping was double-checking the bridal suite. Everything seemed under control. By late afternoon, the ceremony began. I wasn't inside the ballroom for the vows, that wasn't my role, but I hovered nearby, ensuring sound systems worked, that the catering staff were ready for cocktail service, that nothing would disrupt the flow of the evening. From the sound of applause and laughter drifting through the doors, I could tell the ceremony had gone beautifully. At 6 p.m., the reception began. Guests gathered for cocktails in our elegant lobby before moving into the ballroom. I began my rounds, as I always did, checking on the staff, surveying the room. The chandeliers glowed, the band played, and from a professional standpoint, everything seemed flawless. I saw Victoria 3 times that evening during my routine check-ins. First at 7:30 p.m. during cocktails. She was radiant, moving between guests, laughing easily, champagne flute in hand. To me, she seemed like any joyful bride. Second, at 9 p.m. during dinner. I paused by the head table, exchanged a few words with Michael Morrison, the groom. He thanked me warmly for the service. I remember glancing at Victoria. She seemed more animated than I'd seen in our previous meetings. She laughed loudly, gestured widely. At the time, I chalked it up to happiness, to the energy of the evening. But in hindsight, I wonder if I should have seen more. At the Grand Heritage, our policy on intoxicated guests was clear. Monitored discreetly. Step in only if someone seemed in imminent danger or caused a disruption. We weren't babysitters. We were professionals hosting events. A bride dancing a little too enthusiastically wasn't grounds for intervention, especially when her own family and friends were nearby. That night, by all visible measures, Victoria was just another bride enjoying her wedding. But appearances deceive. Around 11:30, I left my office to make a final sweep of the common areas. I checked the lobby, the corridors, and finally the ballroom. Guests were beginning to collect belongings, hugging goodbyes. At midnight, I saw Michael and Victoria leave together. He supported her by the arm. She leaned into him heavily. It was noticeable. Her head rested briefly against his shoulder. Did I think she was dangerously intoxicated? No. She looked tired, drained, like many brides after long celebrations. To me, it seemed natural that his husband was guiding her upstairs to rest. But the image stayed with me, the way she clung, the way her steps faltered. The last of the guests departed around 1:30 a.m. Catering began clearing tables, collecting linens, storing leftover food. I remained on site until 1:15 a.m., overseeing cleanup. I locked the public areas, ensured valuable items were secured, and then I left. Yes, I left. That point has been questioned ever since. Why did I go home when the couple was still in the building? Why didn't I remain until morning as some managers might? My answer is simple. Because by 1:15 a.m., the event was over. The bride and groom were in their suite. Guests had departed. Staff had their assignments. It was routine. But critics later claimed that my decision created a dangerous gap, that by leaving the property, I left the hotel vulnerable. At 3:45 a.m., my phone rang.
Our night security guard was frantic. Paramedics had been called to the presidential suite. The bride wasn't breathing. I drove back immediately. By the time I arrived, police and paramedics were already there. Victoria lay on the bed, still in her gown, motionless. Michael was collapsed nearby, weeping, incoherent. The scene was chaos. Uniformed officers, medical bags, the hushed tension of death inside a room that had been decorated for joy only hours earlier. I cannot describe the weight that hit me then. This was my hotel, my responsibility. The police questioned me thoroughly. Where was I during the critical hours? Why did the hotel have only one security guard on duty overnight? Why were there no cameras in the guest room corridors? Why did I not intervene when the bride appeared intoxicated? I answered honestly. Our system was standard for the era. Cameras in lobbies and common areas, not in private wings. Keycard records showed the bridal suite was accessed at 12:05 a.m., then not again until Michael re-entered at 3:30 a.m. But our system couldn't log real-time exits. If someone had borrowed or stolen a keycard, we wouldn't know. That weakness became a focal point. Investigators asked, who else had access? Staff? Vendors? Could someone have entered unseen? And then came the harsher questions. Why did I know the keycard system so well? Why did I describe its limitations in such detail? Was I explaining, or was I covering?
Yes, our night staff was thin, only one guard for the entire property. At the time, I considered it sufficient. We weren't a casino or a skyscraper, we were a luxury hotel with average occupancy. But hindsight paints it differently. From midnight to 3:30 a.m., our guard couldn't be everywhere. And there were blind spots, hallways with no cameras, service entrances without consistent monitoring. Could someone have used them? Absolutely. But then again, who knew those blind spots existed? Only staff. Only me. After the tragedy, the press descended. Headlines accused the hotel of negligence. Families called, demanding refunds, threatening lawsuits. The Matthews family, grieving their daughter, questioned why my staff hadn't noticed her deteriorating condition. In the weeks that followed, I implemented changes. More cameras, more guards, new protocols for monitoring intoxicated guests. I told myself it was the right thing to do, but deep down, it was too late. Every time I walked the corridors, I imagined Victoria's steps that night, her laughter, her stumble, her final moments. Did we all miss the signs, or did I ignore them, afraid to interfere? I stayed 3 more years. Business recovered slowly, but the Matthews case haunted me. Every wedding felt heavy. Every drunk guest made me tense. I became paranoid, overcautious. By 2001, I left Charleston and took a job at a smaller boutique hotel in Savannah. Fewer events, fewer risks. But the shadow followed me. For decades, I kept hoping new evidence would emerge, that someone else would be identified, that responsibility would shift away from the hotel. In 2024, that happened. DNA cleared lingering doubts. Another suspect was named. It was shocking. Someone within the wedding circle had killed her. But it was also a relief. At last, I wasn't the focus. Or so I thought. Because even now, people point to me. They ask, why did Robert leave at 1:15 a.m. when the bride's condition was clearly concerning? Why did he minimize the signs of intoxication, describing them as enthusiasm? And why did he know so much about the blind spots of his own security system? And why does his timeline from midnight to 1:15 fit so conveniently into the window when Victoria was last seen alive? Innocent negligence or calculated oversight? Which one describes me? I want Victoria's family to know that not a day passes without me thinking of her. I wish we had recognized her distress sooner. I wish my systems had been stronger, my staff more vigilant. But I also want you, the listener, to judge. Because some investigators still wonder if my account is too neat, too rehearsed.
I say I was a manager doing his job. Others whisper I was something else entirely. So what do you believe? Was I an overconfident hotel manager who left gaps in security, creating the perfect storm for tragedy? Or was I more than that? A man who knew the blind spots too well, who disappeared at the exact hour when the bride's life slipped away. That night will never leave me, and neither will the questions. My name is David Morrison, and for 26 years I have carried a truth so heavy it poisoned every step of my life. On June 20th, 1998, I was the wedding photographer for Victoria Matthews and Michael Morrison. That night should have been the happiest night of their lives. Instead, it became a tragedy that silenced one of the brightest souls I ever encountered. And now, with DNA evidence exposing what really happened, I can no longer hide behind the lies I built for myself. I have to tell my side, not to absolve myself because nothing could erase my guilt, but to show you how obsession can twist a man's heart until it becomes unrecognizable. People think they know the story. They think it's simple, a stalker killed a bride. But the truth is more complicated, more insidious. Yes, I was obsessed with Victoria Matthews. Yes, I followed her, documented her, infiltrated her wedding. And yes, I killed her. But you need to understand how I became that man and why I made the choices that destroyed not only her life, but mine. And when you finish listening, I ask you one thing. Do you believe me when I say it wasn't supposed to end this way? I first saw Victoria in September 1997, nearly a year before the wedding. I'd been hired to photograph a charity fundraiser at the Charleston Museum where she worked as a volunteer coordinator. I was 27, still trying to make my name as a photographer. Weddings, fundraisers, society events, that was my bread and butter. When Victoria entered the room, it was as though the air shifted. She had this ethereal presence. Her laugh bubbled like music. Her smile disarmed everyone. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was striking. She had an energy that seemed to light the space around her. She moved from donor to volunteer, thanking them, adjusting details with ease. And I couldn't stop photographing her. At first, I told myself it was professional. She was the perfect subject, photogenic, alive in every frame. But I knew even then that my lens was lingering too long, that I was capturing more than memories. I was capturing her. That night, I went home and developed the photos. I spread them across my apartment floor. Victoria laughing, Victoria just of a flower arrangement, Victoria mid-conversation, eyes alight. And I realized I wanted more. After that, I found excuses to be near her. I learned her schedule at the museum. I drove by just to see her leaving. I attended charity events, weddings, anything I thought she might be connected to, always with my camera, always with a cover story. The truth, I became a shadow. I documented her life like a project. Her errands, her friends, her walks through downtown Charleston, hundreds of photographs, then thousands. I told myself I was creating an artistic study of a muse, but it wasn't art. It was obsession, feeding on itself until I couldn't distinguish fantasy from reality. And then came the blow that shattered what little tether I had to sanity. February 1998. I learned she was engaged to Michael Morrison. When I saw their engagement announcement, my chest caved in. I'd built a fantasy where Victoria and I shared a silent understanding, a bond unspoken but real, and suddenly she was promising herself to another man. I researched him obsessively. Michael Morrison, law student, well-liked, stable, a man people respected, a man she chose. I convinced myself he wasn't good enough, that he didn't see her the way I did, didn't cherish her. In my twisted logic, her engagement wasn't love, it was a mistake I had to correct. This wasn't jealousy, at least I didn't call it that. It was duty, destiny. I told myself I was protecting her. Do you see how delusion works? It cloaks itself in noble language, but underneath it's selfish hunger. When I learned the wedding would be at the Grand Heritage Hotel, something ignited. If she was to be married, I had to be there. Not as a guest, no, I wasn't invited, but I could insert myself. I discovered who the couple had hired for photography. Through careful lies and manipulation, I fabricated a crisis, a scheduling conflict that forced their original photo agent to cancel. Then I slipped in, recommended by a mutual acquaintance I had strategically cultivated. It worked. Victoria and Michael, panicked about losing their photographer so close to the date, welcomed me as their savior. I smiled, professional, reassuring. They never suspected that the emergency had been my invention. Do you see the danger here? Evil doesn't always appear with threats or weapons. Sometimes it comes dressed as a helping hand. June 20th, 1998. I arrived at 8 a.m. Cameras, lenses, flashes, all the tools of my trade. But hidden in my bag were other items. Small recording devices, a bottle of champagne, and a vial of sedative I had obtained months before. I told myself I wouldn't need them, that I could simply watch, capture her beauty, and leave with the memory. But I had carried those items like talismans, ready for an opportunity if it arose. Throughout the day, I photographed everything – the hair and makeup, the dress, the nervous laughter. Victoria glowed. I watched her more closely than my lens revealed. Every smile felt like a signal meant for me, every glance like confirmation that she knew, deep down, I was the one who truly understood her. Fantasy had swallowed reality whole. As she walked down the aisle, radiant in white, my heart wrenched. Part of me prayed this moment would shatter my illusions, that seeing her joy with Michael would free me. Instead, it hardened my resolve. How could she bind herself to him when she and I were meant to be? I clicked my shutter, frame after frame. But what I was capturing wasn't just their vows. It was my proof. My evidence that she was mine, even as she spoke words to another man. By evening, champagne flowed, music swelled, guests danced. Victoria laughed, but I saw the fatigue behind her eyes. And I noticed something else. She drank more than usual. Not recklessly, but enough to blur her edges. At 10 p.m., I approached her with my pretext. I complimented her beauty, her wedding, her perfection. She thanked me warmly like she thanked everyone else, but to me it was intimate, coded, a sign. That was when I decided to act. From my bag I retrieved the bottle, premium, celebratory, but tainted with sedative. I offered it as a special toast. She accepted. One glass, then another, and another, each sip drawing her closer to me, each swallow tightening the trap I had laid. But here is where my plan faltered. The sedative struck harder than I anticipated, colliding with the alcohol she had already consumed. By 11:30, she was stumbling, incoherent, her eyes glassy. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't wanted to harm her, at least that's what I told myself. I only wanted her vulnerable enough to listen, to understand. Instead, I had poisoned her. At midnight, I told Michael I'd help her upstairs. He thanked me. He had no idea. I guided her to the suite, using a key card I had stolen weeks earlier during one of my reconnaissance visits. Inside, she collapsed onto the bed. I hovered, panicked, whispering apologies. I offered water, begged her to wake, promised I would take care of her. But her breaths grew shallow, her body limp, and still I didn't call for help. Why? Because fear chained me, fear of exposure, fear of losing the fantasy. If I dialed 911, everything I had built would crumble and the world would see me for what I was, a predator, not a lover. So I stayed. I sat beside her, stroking her hair, confessing my feelings to her unconscious form. For 2 hours I spoke to her like she could hear me, explaining my devotion, my delusion, my sin. And then, around 2:30 a.m., I felt her slipping away. I remember it vividly. Her chest rose and fell, then faltered. I leaned closer, praying, pleading, but the rhythm stopped. She was gone. I sat frozen. 22 years old, on her wedding night, gone because of me. The weight crushed me, yet even then, cowardice ruled. Instead of confessing, instead of seeking help, I thought only of escape. I cleaned the room, wiped glasses, smoothed sheets, erased fingerprints. I left no trace. Then I slipped out through a service exit I had memorized long before. I drove home in silence. Not triumph, not grief, just numbness. I told myself maybe she would wake, maybe Michael would find her only asleep, but deep down I knew the truth. Morning brought confirmation. She was dead. Police began their investigation. They questioned everyone – Jake, Sarah, the hotel staff. They looked at me too, of course, but I played the role of the professional. I showed them my photos. I smiled politely. I offered nothing but helpful cooperation. Inside, I was rotting. And yet, suspicion drifted elsewhere. The best man, the maid of honor, the hotel manager all endured whispers. I watched as others carried the burden that should have been mine, and I let them. I left Charleston. I abandoned photography. I destroyed thousands of images of Victoria, though some I could never bring myself to burn. I lived in exile from my own life, carrying guilt like a disease. No marriage, no children, no friends. How could I? I was a murderer masquerading as a man. For 26 years, I waited. Every knock at the door, every phone call, I thought it was the end. And in 2024, it came. DNA from a champagne glass, my DNA. The science that didn't exist in 1998 finally caught me. When they came for me, I didn't fight. Relief washed over me. The mask could finally fall. I told myself I would confess, and I did. But confession doesn't cleanse. It only exposes. Now the world knows me as I truly am. Not a photographer, not an artist, but a predator who turned a wedding into a funeral. Even with my confession, do you believe the story is complete? Think of it. How did I obtain the key card so easily? How did I know the security blind spots of the hotel? Could I really have orchestrated everything alone? The investigators asked those same questions, and though I admitted my crime, some still wonder if someone inside the hotel helped me. I say I acted alone, but then again, haven't I lied before? Victoria Matthews should have lived. She should have taught art to children, raised a family growing old in love. Instead, my obsession robbed her of everything. I want her family to know I am sorry, though the word feels pathetic against the scale of my crime. I want Michael to know I destroyed the life he deserved, and nothing I suffer will ever equal his loss. But most of all, I want you, the listener, to ask yourself, do you believe me? Do you believe this is the whole story? Or do you suspect, as others do, that darker forces lingered behind me, that someone else opened the door I walked through? I was the photographer meant to preserve memories. Instead, I stole them. And for 26 years, I lived in the shadows of a truth too monstrous to face. Now you know my story, but the question remains, is it the whole truth or just another carefully framed picture? In March 2024, Detective Lieutenant Maria Santos received a phone call that would finally crack one of Charleston's most haunting cold cases. The South Carolina State Crime Lab had successfully extracted viable DNA samples from evidence stored for 26 years. evidence that, at last, would identify Victoria Matthews' killer. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a champagne glass collected from the Grand Heritage Hotel's ballroom in 1998. Back then, it was just another piece of clutter among dozens of items bagged by police. But now, thanks to advances in forensics, even the faintest trace of saliva on the rim told its story. That DNA profile matched someone in the national database. His name? David Morrison, age 54, already arrested in Oregon back in 2019 on stalking charges. That arrest meant his DNA was stored, waiting for the day science would catch up.
Detective Santos dug into Morrison's past, and what she uncovered was chilling. For 9 months before the wedding, Morrison had stalked Victoria. He wasn't just taking pictures, he was documenting her daily life with the precision of a surveillance operative. Detailed logs of her movements, maps of her favorite routes, even break-ins to her apartment where he planted recording devices and stole personal belongings. His seized computer files revealed over 10,000 images of Victoria taken without her knowledge, at work, shopping, dining, even walking alone at night. She never knew she was the centerpiece of a predator's obsession. But the worst discovery was Morrison's written plan. Hidden in a laptop folder, investigators found a step-by-step outline of how he would worm his way into the wedding, how he would manipulate the photography contract, how he would access the bridal suite, and how he would drug Victoria to make her death look like alcohol poisoning. His journals revealed a disturbed psychology, convinced Victoria was sending him secret signals, that she was secretly unhappy with Michael, that she would welcome his rescue. This wasn't infatuation. This was premeditated murder, hidden beneath the guise of a wedding photographer. And Victoria might not have been the only target. Police found files on at least 6 other women Morrison had stalked across different cities. Names, addresses, photographs, routines. While none of those cases ended in murder, investigators believe his obsession was escalating, and Victoria's wedding simply became the first time his fantasy went too far. When confronted with the DNA and the mountain of evidence, Morrison tried to deny it, but the science was irrefutable. Cornered, he confessed. He admitted to lacing the champagne with sedatives obtained through forged prescriptions. He admitted calculating the dosage to incapacitate Victoria without killing her, so he could spend time alone with her on her wedding night. But he miscalculated, and when she began to die, he froze. Instead of calling for help, he sat beside her bed, whispering to her unconscious form, even photographing her final moments. Then he cleaned the suite and slipped out of the hotel. Cowardice. That's the word the prosecutors used. For 3 innocent witnesses, Morrison's confession brought long overdue relief. Jake Morrison, the best man, lived under whispers for decades, suspected because of his surname and his proximity. Sarah Chen, the maid of honor, carried unbearable guilt for not reporting Victoria's words in the bathroom that she felt unsafe. Robert Davidson, the hotel manager, spent his career wondering if his security failures had enabled the tragedy. And then there was, of course, Michael, Victoria's husband of only a few hours. For 26 years, he carried the torment of not knowing what happened that night. When the news came, he issued a statement. While nothing can bring Victoria back, knowing that her killer has finally been brought to justice allows our family to honor her memory without the constant questions about what happened that night. Victoria's parents, Thomas and Margaret Matthews, sat in the courtroom during sentencing. Margaret's victim statement left the room in tears. Victoria wanted to be an art teacher. She wanted children. She wanted to make the world brighter. David Morrison didn't just kill our daughter, he killed every life she would have touched, every good she would have done. Morrison received life without parole for first-degree murder, plus additional years for stalking, breaking and entering, and tampering with evidence. At 54, he will die in prison. His apology was brief, and to many, hollow. "I know I deserve punishment. I hope her family finds peace." But peace is complicated. From the ashes of tragedy came change. The Grand Heritage Hotel, now under new ownership, installed advanced security systems and strict vendor background checks. Professional photography organizations updated ethical codes demanding tighter screening. And in 2024, South Carolina passed Victoria's Law, requiring comprehensive checks for all wedding vendors and harsher penalties for stalkers who hide behind professional services. Sarah Chen launched a foundation in Victoria's name, supporting victims of stalking and funding research into obsessive behavior. And at the Grand Heritage Hotel, a memorial garden now blooms. Student artwork lines the path, and a scholarship fund supports young women pursuing art education, the future Victoria never had. For Charleston, the conviction closed a wound that had bled for 26 years. For the Matthews family, it meant turning grief into legacy. And for Victoria Matthews, it meant her story no longer ended in silence. The photographer who should have captured the happiest moments of her life instead stole them. But in the end, science, persistence, and truth restored her memory. What about you? Did you suspect the killer from the beginning, or did the conflicting witness stories throw you off? Let us know in the comments if you guessed the killer's identity before the reveal. And remember, subscribe to uncover more stories they tried to bury, because no name deserves to be forgotten.